Good morning. We are coming into the final days of the 2025 legislative session. It wraps up next Wednesday. Here to talk about what's been decided and what still needs to be decided are WFSB chief political reporter Susan Raff. She's at the state capitol. And joining me in studio, Dan Haar, senior editor and columnist with CT Insider. Welcome to both of you. We are at the point of the session where I need the full-size piece of paper and the pen so that I can moderate this section. I'm going to start with you, Dan. One of the big things we've talked about a lot is money and the governor with this spending cap. Tell us what's happening with that, because that's something that
generally speaking, we have more money than we're allowed to spend under the rules. And generally speaking, we are keeping to that rule that we're not going to go over the percentage. It's about 5%, a little less. And it's plenty of money, and the governor insists on that. But we had a $300 Medicaid bill that we had to make up from overage over the last 2 years. There is a debate about whether the way we are doing it, i.e. taking money out of surplus and putting it and paying that bill, is or is not busting through the cap.
And so there's different opinions on whether or not we are exceeding the spending cap. The governor has said he won't, and he claims he didn't.
No, he's going to do it. Everybody agrees with the fix. The question is whether this fix constitutes violating the cap. And the governor says, no, it doesn't, and other people says, yes, it does, and nobody cares because we're doing it.
All right, nobody cares, so we'll move on to the next topic. Susan, that means we're going out to you. Housing is a big issue at the state capitol as well. Tell us where that stands and why our viewers should care about that.
Well, housing is a huge issue in our state. As you know, everyone has been talking for years now about how does Connecticut create more affordable housing. And that's something that the legislature is now tackling. The House has a huge bill. There's a lot of different components to it. It would remove some zoning requirements, and then there's some parking limitations. But the big issue here for a lot of developers, they say the real issue is really the cost of building a house and the cost of developing, the cost of permits. Those are things that need to be addressed. Those are huge issues, obviously, for Connecticut. Will that get tackled this year? Hopefully, because I think Connecticut is in a situation where it needs more housing if it continues or wants to grow.
Susan, I'll stick with you because you were just talking about all the cost issues. Another big one is energy. Anything we're hearing, so many people are getting those bills. Is there anything that's going to happen? And then I'll turn to Dan on that one as well.
Well, I think the short answer is yes. It may not be to the level that everybody wants to see. I mean, keep in mind, energy is extremely complicated, right? And there's a lot that goes into that. But what they're talking about now is removing a portion or some of that public benefits charge that's on our bills, and instead the state would bond that money over a longer period of time. Keep in mind, if the state borrows that money, it's a lot cheaper than the utilities borrowing. So that's a good thing. If that happens, that's probably going to pass. The other thing that they're talking about are having smart meters. Neighboring Massachusetts has them, for example, and that gives people a little more say and knowledge about when to use power. And that would be something that the state would bond. But it won't be something that we're going to see anytime soon, certainly not in the next year or two. But smart meters, everyone seems to agree that's the way to go. But it's really the public benefits portion of our bill, which a lot of people were upset about. Some of that could very much be taken off the bill and financed in another way.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the bonding is a compromise. The Republicans wanted to take those portions of the bill and put them in the regular budget, i.e. the chopping block. The Democrats wanted to, some of them wanted to keep it the way it is. So the bonding is a sort of a compromise. But to Susan's point, we're not going to see the relief that I think a lot of households would like to see. It's going to be a relatively smaller bonding package for that portion of it. As for bonding for smart meters, there are issues with that, and they have to work them out. It's not such an easy thing. You don't just snap your fingers and borrow money and put smart meters in. There are lots of legal questions about that.
Another thing that's getting a lot of publicity, Dan, is the Trust Act. Tell us about that and what it means for people here in Connecticut.
Yeah, the Trust Act is the provision that was passed in 2013, strengthened in 2019, which prevents state employees from cooperating with ICE, with U.S. federal immigration employees, on certain things. Right? It doesn't say you can't cooperate with them. It prevents them from uncertain things. There are people that wanted to strengthen that and say, let's say, for example, make a right of action to the law to sue a person or to fire a person who cooperates. It has no teeth. Other people wanted to weaken it by saying, let's add in the number of, for example, sexual assault felonies are probably going to be added back in. If there's a sexual assault charge against an immigrant, yes, you can cooperate with ICE. So it's fraught on both sides.
And certainly something that's been getting a lot of attention nationwide as well, that type of issue. Another one that gets a lot of attention is this bear hunt bill. And I know this is very much in flux. But listen, I think you said it, you know, furry things, people don't like shooting furry things.
People don't, right.
So where does this stand?
Where it stands right now is it's still up in the air, and the bear hunt, it's going to come down to the wire whether anything passes at all. There was a version of it that said, a study bill, basically, that said, let's look at it and see what we have to do. And then there was a later amendment that said that gives DEEP, Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, the right to declare an emergency. You know, we love emergencies. Now that Trump is doing it, everybody's saying this is an emergency, right? In an emergency, you would be able to have a hunt without further legislative approval, or at least a formal vote. And so the conservation people are against that.
Well, and maybe some legislators think, well, if we don't vote to shoot the furry things, maybe it's less objectionable.
The tragedy is, the tragic prospect is, if a person is killed, that will change the mind of the legislators, and that's the bottom line.
And it's a serious issue. I mean, we joke, but it's a serious issue.
If you have a bear in your kitchen, as the speaker said during the week, this past week. So.
Susan, I want to ask you about education. Such a big topic, and I know it's something that was in the headlines a lot this past week with people supporting it and talking about what's happening. Where do we stand on education in the waning days here?
Education, as you know, is a real big priority for the state of Connecticut. And this week, we saw hundreds of teachers and educators come to the state capitol with a very loud voice, and they want lawmakers and the governor to listen to them. They're having a very difficult time at schools across the state, not only retaining the teachers that they have, but recruiting new ones. Now, there is quite a bit of money in the budget. The House Speaker made a note of that, millions of dollars in the formula, the ECS formula. But a lot of people say that the ECS formula has not been fully funded for years, and so the schools need more money. They also need a lot more for special education. There is money in the budget for that, but these educators have a pretty loud voice. They met with the governor this week, urging him to commit to more money. In fact, I think they told him they want about $500 million. Probably not going to get that amount, but maybe, just maybe, there might be a little extra money, and that's something, obviously, that people really care about in our state.
We're almost out of time, Susan. I want to leave you with this. What are a couple things you'll be watching? Just 20 seconds or something. What do you got for us? What's important to watch?
Well, I would have to say artificial intelligence. That's something that everybody, or most people when polled, want to see some rules and regulations when it comes to that. But the governor feels that any proposal that stifles creativity and business, he's not going to support that. And I would think that he's probably not going to do that. We don't have a lot of time left, obviously, for the legislative session, but I think education is very important. Also, child care. That's something that the governor and legislators are still working on. What kind of benefits there could be for working families so that they can stay in the workforce and find good, affordable child care.
Dan, what are you watching the last few days?
Pesticides, there was a watered-down, weak version. At least that if that stays, you have something to build on. Expansion of sports betting to include in-state betting on UConn. That's sort of quietly on the table. We'll see if it passes. And in the big picture, whether the nonprofit service providers get a little bit more money. Also, conservation measures. Do they survive the energy bill?
All right, interesting stuff. Dan Haar, Susan Raff at the Capitol. We appreciate both of you being here with us on CT25. We will, of course, have you back. If you'd like to read Dan's columns, you'll find them on ctinsider.com.